He jerked away with an expression of fear and dismay, and tripped over one of Brutal's big feet. He went down hard, hitting the linoleum with the back of his head. Mr. Jingles leapt away in time to avoid being crushed, and went squeaking off down the Green Mile to Delacroix's cell. Delacroix got to his feet, gave the chuckling Percy a single hate-filled glance, then scurried off after his pet, calling for him and rubbing the back of his head. Brutal, who didn't know that Percy had shown exciting signs of competency for a change, gave Percy a wordless look of contempt and went after Del, shaking his keys out. I think what happened next happened because Percy was actually moved to apologize. I know it's hard to believe, but he was in an extraordinary humor that day. If true, it only proves a cynical old adage I heard once, something about how no good deed goes unpunished. Remember me telling you about how, after he'd chased the mouse down to the restraint room on one of those 2 occasions before Delacroix joined us, Perry got a little too close to the praise cell? Doing that was dangerous, which was why the Green Mile was so wide. When you walked straight down the middle of it, you couldn't be reached from the cells. The prey hadn't done anything to Percy, but I remember thinking that Arlen Bitterbuck might have, had it been him Percy had gotten too close to. Just to teach him a lesson. Well, the prey and the chief had both moved on, but Wild Bill Wharton had taken their place. He was worse-mannered than the prey or the chief had ever dreamed of being, and he'd been watching the whole little play, hoping for a chance to get on stage himself. That chance now fell into his lap, courtesy of Percy Wetmore. "Hey, Del," Percy called, half laughing, starting after Brutal and Delacroix and drifting much too close to Wharton's side of the Green Mile without realizing it. "Hey, you numb shit, I didn't mean nothin' by it. Are you all re?" Wharton was up off his bunk and over to the bars of his cell in a flash. Never in my time as a guard did I see anyone move so fast, and that includes some of the athletic young men Brutal and I worked with later at Boys Correctional. He shot his arms out through the bars and grabbed Percy, first by the shoulders of his uniform blouse and then by the throat. Wharton dragged him back against his cell door. Percy squealed like a pig in a slaughter chute, and I saw from his eyes that he thought he was going to die. "Ain't you sweet," Wharton whispered. One hand left Percy's throat and ruffled through his hair. "Soft," he said, half laughing. "Like a girl's. I'd druther fuck your asshole than your sister's pussy, I think." And he actually kissed Percy's ear. I think Percy, who had beat Delacroix onto the block for accidentally brushing his crotch, remember, knew exactly what was happening. I doubt that he wanted to, but I think he did. All the color had drained from his face, and the blemishes on his cheeks stood out like birthmarks. His eyes were huge and wet. A line of spittle leaked from one corner of his twitching mouth. All this happened quick. It was begun and done in less than 10 seconds, I'd say. Harry and I stepped forward, our billies raised. Dean drew his gun. But before things could go so much as an inch further, Wharton let go of Perry and stepped back, raising his hands to his shoulders and grinning his dank grin. "I let him go. I was just playin' and I let him go," he said. "Never hurt ary single hair on that boy's purty head, so don't you go stickin' me down in that goddamn soft room again." Percy Wetmore darted across the Green Mile and cringed against the barred door of the empty cell on the other side, breathing so fast and so loud that it sounded almost like sobbing. He had finally gotten his lesson in keeping to the center of the Green Mile and away from the frumious Bandersnatch, the teeth that bite and the claws that catch. I had an idea it was a lesson that would stick with him longer than all the advice we'd given him after our rehearsals. There was an expression of utter terror on his face, and his precious hair was seriously mussed up for the first time since I'd met him, all in spikes and tangles. He looked like someone who has just escaped being raped. There was a moment of utter stop then, a quiet so thick that the only sound was the sobbing whistle of Percy's breathing. What broke it was cackling laughter, so sudden and so completely its own mad thing that it was shocking. "Wharton," was my first thought, but it wasn't him. It was Delacroix, standing in the open door of his cell and pointing at Percy. The mouse was back on his shoulder, and Delacroix looked like a small but malevolent male witch, complete with imp. "Look at him, he done piss his pants," Delacroix howled. Look at what the big man done. Bus other people with his stick, may we some mauvais homme, but when someone touch him, he make water in his pants jus like a baby. He laughed and pointed, all his fear and hatred of Percy coming out in that derisive laughter. Percy stared at him, seemingly incapable of moving or speaking. Wharton stepped back to the bars of his cell, looked down at the dark splotch on the front of Percy's trousers. It was small but it was there, and no question about what it was, and grinned. Somebody ought to buy the tough boy a diety, he said, and went back to his bunk, chuffing laughter. Brutal went down to Delacroix's cell, but the Cajun had ducked inside and thrown himself on his bunk before Brutal could get there. I reached out and grasped Percy's shoulder. "Percy," I began, but that was as far as I got. He came to life, shaking my hand off. He looked down at the front of his pants, saw the spot spreading there, and blushed a dark, fiery red. He looked up at me again, then at Harry and Dean. I remember being glad that old Toot Toot was gone.